1 hour. So I've timed myself because I want to give myself about 15 minutes of time with a Q&A with you. So I'm going to start by talking about brands and organizations. We work with a lot of organizations. The examples are not the ones necessarily that we work with right now. But organizations and brands that have really used innovation, they've been on top, they tanked, they dipped, they didn't have a way out of it. Some way or the other, they made innovation really bring their fortunes back. So we're going to discuss some of those brands, Indian brands. A large part of it is actually international brands because you're in the industry, you've been in the industry for a long time, you know all the Indian brands, so I don't want to repeat it. So we're going to do a little quiz kind of a session, okay? So I have some giveaways. I'm not going to go away without making you happy. So I have giveaways. So with some of these quizzes, I'm going to ask you which brand or organization I'm talking about. And please just raise your hands. Don't start answering because there's no way I'll know who came up with the first answer. And we don't want to end this in a battle of outdoor people. So we're going to have just hands being raised. And I'm going to just pick at random somebody to answer. And the answers are correct. Whoever gives me the first right answer will actually get something from me on, I have my goodies out here, okay? So you're going to get something from me on some of the latest books on innovation or some other books as well. And there is a little envelope sponsored by our company. It's, you're going to gasp, $1,000, okay? So there's a $1,000 gift here and a book for whoever gets the answers right. So that definitely, I think they can't believe it, it's okay, doesn't matter. But this means that you have to pay attention. Thank you. Now I know everyone's going to pay attention. Is it not on? Can someone fix it? Somehow technology never works. I'm kidding. That's just joking. British American Tobacco in London. And the entire conference was actually put together by the IT people in BAT because they've done some excellent work on IT globally. And they were the last speakers. So went smoothly, everybody spoke. It was the entire day's session. And right at the end was the IT team to kind of close the session and say what a wonderful job they've done and got it all right. And guess what happened? The systems crashed. They couldn't present. I'm running out of jokes. Yeah. Okay. Right. So like I said, the examples are not necessarily going to be from not even from the outdoor industry, because I think if you have 2 days of outdoors, you're going to have all the outdoor coming out of all your indoors. So I'm actually not going to touch upon any outdoors at all, maybe 1 or 2 examples, but really take you through some innovation myths that, you know, the organizations we've been working with, and I have been working for about 25, 27 years, I've lost count. But in that many years, I've actually had organizations and people, really experienced people also coming and telling us, you know, we need to do some innovation because well, we have to revive the business, or it's very expensive, so we can't do it. Or sometimes, you know, for paint industry, for a very, very long time came and said that paints, it's just not possible to innovate, just like cements, for example. It's not possible to innovate because it's a basic category, basic product. You can just have color differences, etc., till Asian Paints came and completely changed the game. And a lot of people even today believe that, you know, it's probably only product-based or technology-based, so they don't really think beyond in their boundaries in terms of what can innovation really do for them, right? And there's one more myth, of course, that Nomi Mehta was born before 1975. That never changes. But a lot of people are still operating in their innovations with 2 dimensions only, okay? They're looking at either the product innovation, even in your case, I think if you look at the outdoor industry as well, try and put yourselves also in all of these examples and see, you know, if you can get some learnings out of this, or if some of these glitches have happened with you in your industry as well. So either they're looking at product innovation on the one hand, or advertising innovation. I think a lot of people have shifted to advertising innovation purely because the gimmick sometimes works, if you don't have a product story, really. What we're going to talk about is 7-dimensional innovations, okay? So there are, some of the brands have managed to do all 7 dimensions, which we'll come to at the end, but some product, either it's product or it's on talent, or it's on communication, or whatever. So we'll see how seven-dimensional innovation really comes into play. So there are product, retail innovations have happened, media and communication innovations, market innovation, where you've completely changed a market and you were operating on a completely different platform, and today you've changed the battleground and therefore completely, gotten the competition out there wondering what were they competing against right now. Then there's process innovation. A lot of interesting process innovations happen in India as well. And a lot of lateral innovation. When I say lateral innovation, I'm talking about, again, when we do we work with the organizations of lateral innovation, and we get them to scope out first and then in. Rather than, for example, saying in your industry, for example, saying that, here's outdoor, let's see how we can innovate in outdoor as an industry. You'll never get any interesting innovations, because all you're going to be doing is a lot of incremental innovation. You really need to get yourselves out of it and say, today we're not discussing outdoor. We're going to look at the next 2 hours in terms of how can we get the attention of a person who's outside. And I say this, there's a subtle difference. I say it because I think the outdoor industry has missed out on a great opportunity with mobiles. I'll tell you why. A lot of people are spending time outdoors, right, with mobiles. There are banners out there on mobile, there's mobile advertising. How do you see it? Do you see it as out of home, or do you see it as digital? Probably the outdoor industry has always been seeing it as digital, and which is why they haven't come into that space early, and I think that's a little bit of a missed opportunity, but there's time to pick up on that. So we look at some examples of product innovation. I will not run through these in detail because all of you know these case studies, but very interestingly, if you look at Lifebuoy, 21% market share in soaps in the carbolic, and 95% in the carbolic soap segment. There's actually nobody out there at that time when they launched it. And progressively, if you look at the Lifebuoy packaging changing, they've actually they've upgraded the products, and they've managed to do it successfully at every stage. So they moved from being carbolic to toilet soap, introducing the family, and then saying family soap, and then saying total. Then going into the upgraded versions of hand washes and hand sanitizers. And now they've taken a much higher ground of saying any child under the age of 5 should get a chance to survive way above it. I think the insights they were working with, and I say I think because they're the right people to talk about it, but as a parent one can say that parents teaching hygiene to children has really considerably gone up. I think that's a great insight they picked up on. Time is lacking, and therefore they realize that when children also don't have time, hand sanitizers and hand washes become important, and therefore the 10-second answer to lack of time comes in. High discipline of attendance in school. So which means the schools are actually pushing and driving the children not to miss days of attendance, which is putting the pressure on parents to say, just pack in a little sanitizer into their bag, because they're falling sick in school. It's playing with these little things that parents go through now. So that's really been very interesting in terms of the product innovation, how they've taken it into conceptual innovation. Do you raise your hand? I'm watching every move from here, so you've got to watch out. So, okay, let me take you through Absolut Vodka. We've actually had a chance to work on this from the beginning. So Absolut Vodka was Swedish. What did they have to do? They had to compete against the Russian vodkas and establish themselves as the vodka. Now, a large part of product and packaging innovation has been driven by the alcohol and tobacco industry, purely because these are the two industries which had doors closed on them, and they could not advertise. They were operating in what's called the dark markets. And they had no option, because particularly tobacco, at least in some markets, alcohol still manages to get out some direct marketing and things like that. But they realized that they had a really big opportunity with packs. Cigarettes, for example, the pack is with you all the time, just like a mobile phone. It was the one thing that was with you all the time. No other FMCG could be with the consumer 100% of the times. Alcohol bottles also became very interesting, because in bars, when people really can't talk, when the music is loud, they're looking at the bottles, they're looking at the labels, they're reading it, etc., and was highly under-leveraged. So whatever's written here is not what I'm going to read out. Basically, it talks a lot about very interesting facts about where the product got its ingredients from, the water that it picked, the farmers, how carefully they've been picking it and processing it, etc., etc. So the entire story is actually out there on the bottle, and that forms their above-the-line campaign as well. So it really started as a campaign from the product and packaging and moved into the other side. Okay, and then, of course, the entire ATL campaign was all about the product story. A very interesting quick one in 2 seconds. This is Camel. Tobacco, when they could not advertise, decided that they would do interesting schemes with their packaging, where this was the ATL campaign. If you can see it, can you see that it's actually a press ad? And people were encouraged to collect these and put them together, and they were rewarded for having cracked this whole code of being, this is the series in the ad. So that was very interesting and interactive. My second example on this would be on Ferrari. Have you ever seen, who's seen a Ferrari ad? Do you remember the television ad of Ferrari? Anyone remembers it? How many of you remember the Ferrari ad? Some hands must go up. You remember the Ferrari ad? Excellent. Anyone else remembers the Ferrari ad? Just one person. You own a Ferrari. You own a Ferrari. That's why. Okay, no one else? Okay. I'm surprised, you know, because Ferrari is never advertised. Yeah? They actually never advertise as a matter of policy. Even now they don't. The only ad was a joint ad with Shell, which Shell had come up with years ago. This is what Ferrari really did. They started with the Ferrari World, which is a gallery and which is a museum, which was set up in Italy. And this is today also, it remains as a very high destination kind of gallery and a museum where people want to go. They create holidays around it. And more recently, they've launched this park in Abu Dhabi. Has anyone been to this one? You must try and see it. Go see it and see if it's very safe so I can go with my son. So this is what they've done. These are the kind of things that they're doing, really. So Ferrari does not advertise at all. But they did something very interesting when they launched the Ferrari Gallery. They actually had the Ferrari Owners Club of Great Britain, where all the Ferrari owners were part of it. And there was membership where, you know, you could, it runs from 1 year, and you had different events that you would be invited to, which were very, very exclusive. And you were privy to most of the things that were purely for Ferrari owners. And they also had track days, because they also realized that when you own a Ferrari, you want to drive it really fast in the true speed that Ferrari offers you as an experience. And you can't do it because in most parts of the world, it doesn't exist, right? So they created something called the track days, where places like Silverstone, etc., were, you know, taken, the tracks were taken, and that particular day was for the Ferrari owners, not for the Formula One people. So you could go and race your Ferrari and drive it to your heart's content. So that's something very interesting that they did for the Ferrari owners, so that they could really get the experience of how it was. They did another thing. They had to retain the aspiration values of Ferrari for those who couldn't afford a Ferrari, right? So the 99% out here except him. Am I right? Yeah. So the club organized a variety of events each year for those people. It's called the Prancing Horse Register. And it's collectibles, Ferrari collectibles, symbols, icons, little miniature cars, and all of that stuff. Because you're a Ferrari fan, you're going to keep collecting these kind of things. That retained the aspiration value that also told the Ferrari owners that they were exclusive, and they would be part of the Ferrari Members Club. That was in the first dimension in terms of product and packaging. In the second dimension, I want to take you through some retail innovation that's happened. So you can all wake up now, because here comes a quiz. This is a brand, right, which used what we call as brand architecture to the fullest, to a great success worldwide. And this was the first store that we had built for them. It was in a place called Dam Square in Amsterdam. It's the main area where a lot of young people get together. And they come to this store to understand what's happening in all the nightclubs in the city, and spend some early evening time with their friends, and then reach out to all the other outlets. Now, it's very interesting. I'll tell you why this was very interesting. This was based on the brand's positioning of the free-thinking man, which was playful, urban, American, and free spirit. Okay, so that's what it did. It was called 451 Fahrenheit. Why? Because it's the temperature at which paper burns. I'm giving you clues. In any place where there's a quiz, there are clues for you, so listen attentively, okay? And as you walked into the store actually had things which were for the urban, playful American, whatever they liked. Knapsacks, you know, little pen knives, and things that you could go for adventure, the camp gear, etc., etc. You could buy all of this and more. When you walked into the store, this part that you see takes you to the upper deck of the store, where all the, you know, the experiential part of the store is, and of the brand, therefore. And when you looked up, if you stood and looked up like a circular thing, you actually saw the brand's logo forming. Okay, they were the early ones to have really used brand architecture very well. And then when you walked in, The DJ was playing music early evening. They would discuss where to go for that evening. And the nightclubs which were tied up with this outlet or this brand, the same thing, there was a deal that if you had exclusive, there were 5 or 10 nightclubs around Dam Square, whatever, and they had tie-ups here to give information about the events that were happening. In return, the nightclubs would only sell that brand as exclusive. So it was a very neat tie-up where the consumer really didn't know what was going on, being driven to come outdoors into the nightclubs and experience the brand in a very different kind of way. So retail at its best. And the communication before the store opened was also very interesting because it said cold, cool, warm. So every day, and it's in the main store. So if you go to Dam Square, it still exists and you can see it. Every day, the sign kept changing to let people know it's coming up, it's coming up. So the excitement kept getting built. So which brand is this? Anyone? If you were looking for clues, you would find it. Just say something. It's $1,000 in a book. Just say anything. Anyone? Anyone's hand goes up? I'll give you clues since no one's able to guess it. It's a tobacco brand. Now anyone? You have to raise your hands. I won't know you by your voice. No, it's not Marlboro. But raise your hands anyway. You're close. It's very close in the brand appeal as Marlboro. Yeah? Yeah, Lucky Strike. Will you come and take your $1,000 in a book, please? Tell me your name as you come. What? I'm sorry, say it again. Dave. Okay, yeah, Dave. Thanks so much. No, it's okay. I'll come to you from here. Thanks so much for answering that right. And this is the book called The Innovator's Dilemma. This is a fantastic book. Really, it talks about, you know, how innovators, and this is a fairly well-read book by people who are true innovators. They're still struggling. True innovators are also still struggling with the principles of innovation. I think it's an excellent book. You're going to like it. Yeah? Okay, just a request, don't open the envelope just now because I really want everyone to be participating. So the brand was Lucky Strike, and they started innovating in packaging as well. There was packaging, you know, they did very interesting innovations. The motion pack is something they realized that when people had things in their hands, they couldn't open the cigarette pack and take the cigarette out. So you could just flick it like that, and 2 cigarettes will pop out. The thing opens and just pops out, right? The other innovation was this. At any point in time, usually 2 people would share a smoke. And when you open the entire pack, the other cigarettes start getting soiled. So they really had a pack which allowed you to get only 2 cigarettes out. And when you took those out, again, when the next time you opened it, 2 other cigarettes would slide in. So they really created some very interesting innovations based on consumer insights of how to keep it fresh, how to keep it interesting, how to keep it convenient. They also used the packaging called LSMFT on it, which was Lucky Strike, means fine tobacco. So they started advertising about the product on the packaging. And then it moved into a space where people started recognizing the brand so well that you really didn't have to even put the brand name on it. Okay, it's a media and communication innovation, which is in the 3rd dimension. I'll keep checking the time, so I don't want to go overshoot on that. So on media and communication innovation, this is the most interesting, you know, because everybody likes to see the ads and everybody likes to see what's happening in the brand world. But this one, again, it's an iconic yellow heads, little iconic yellow heads, stiff-limbed childhood superheroes, right? But the company went bankrupt. It was resurgent, again went almost on the verge of bankruptcy again. So they had massive debt, a lack of focus, move away from core products, and brought the business to the edge. It had tried to make itself more modern, attractive. In fact, what they did was also that they decided suddenly, for some reason, that they should go into women's products because women are buying a lot of T-shirts and apparels and accessories, so they went into women's products. If I told you the brand, what it is, you'll really be laughing about it, saying, how the hell, who made them do this? Because it's completely out of sync with the brand. And this toy company, so there's a hint there for you, this toy company had once nearly succumbed to its own innovative tactics a decade ago, okay? So the innovation was taken to levels where it started becoming irrelevant, and then today, everything is awesome for them because they've bounced back, they've done extremely well, and what they've done this year has really turned its fortunes around completely. Huge innovation, again, done over the last couple of years, and particularly this year. Anyone? Which brand? Yeah? Mattel. I want the brand, not the company, not the organization. When it's an organization, I'll tell you it's an organization. Sorry? Barbie? No. Who said that? Who said Lego? You have to, yeah, that's right. Lego. See what a morning walk can do? Keeps your mind sharp. So you're going to get something from me. So this was Lego, right? And you have a kid that age, is it? Or are you watching Lego? It's a great movie. It's a fantastic movie. You should see it. I'm forced to see these things, but I loved it. So Lego was the movie. And what they did was, that's a very innovative name as well, the CEO, Jürgen Weg Nussdorf, addressed the debt issue. And what he did was he halved his cost. That's where he first started. His innovation had to wait. First, when he got into the company, he said, let me get the cost down. Let me rationalize the products and bring down the units from 7,000 to 3,000. And let's go back to the basics. Let's knock out this doing women's apparel and all that, because that's not what Lego is all about, okay? So let's get back to what we were really doing, but give it a very contemporary feel, and it's still Lego. So aggressively went into new formats, and that's one of the things they hadn't done. They kept on making those little toys, and children had moved on because of iPads and phones, etc. They were playing games all the time. So Lego took a back seat, and they decided that, okay, let's also follow, that Lego remained, but let's get it onto the format that children are getting used to. But for that, they had to bring it alive in the theaters. So they did the Lego movie, and it's a fantastic movie. It's really amazing how real these characters have become. And children are once again, in fact, this was one of the biggest hits of this year. And they're also exploring possibilities of the numbers and all you can read. So they're exploring possibilities of 3D printers where even children can do it themselves and create their own Lego toys. I believe I read somewhere also that the people who animated the Lego in the Lego movie, they pixelated the products to such a high degree that they could see the speck of dust and everything, little marks and whatever on it, just so that they could get it as accurate as that in the film itself. So that there was, kids felt that this was the real thing. Oh, I have to give you your gift, right? You can come and get your $1,000 and... I know why they're not clapping. They're just really jealous and all of them wishing that this was theirs. So, I'm going to give you the case study of Absolute. I took you through it, but this is a fantastic book too. Thanks so much. And your name, sorry?
Firdaus.
Okay. Thanks, Firdaus. Okay, so on... talent innovation, that's the fourth dimension of innovation, really. There are companies that are really looking at talent. Earlier, in my times, talent, the word talent was never used, okay? I mean, there was nothing called talent. You were just working in these organizations like monkeys and donkeys and, busting your dash off. But what you had to do was just be there and whatever. There was no talent. Then became some kind of training. Again, monkeys were being trained and everybody was getting trained to do well and work harder and make it more productive and increase sales. It was all focused around that. I think now organizations are beginning to understand what a difference it can make to get the right talent into it. And when you were talking about it in terms of the talent in the industry and stuff, what came to my mind was I think outdoor as an industry should also experiment, trying to bring, not inbreed so much, but bring talent from outside. See if you can get people who have nothing to do with outdoor, right? Nothing to do with outdoor. Because when you want to have lateral innovation as part of your process, it cannot be done by people who are constantly it's like, seeing your child grow up and everybody says, oh, how tall he's become, and you go, no, he was born that way, right? Because you don't realize it. You're always living and breathing that brand. So you have to get talent and a good mix of relevant talent from outside to get a good gene pool, a rich gene pool somewhere there. So I'm going to take you through a brand, very big success story in India. Okay, so packaged nutrition is about $500 billion globally. And it was a very small industry in India, didn't do particularly well for a long time, for almost 10 years. Until 2008, this global giant was a small business, just about 140 people and nothing more, okay? And $11 million, or about 55 crores in sales is all they had, with a limited growth, 15% per annum, which was not a great growth for that industry, because in other markets, more developed markets, the healthcare and nutrition growth numbers are much larger. They used talent as a lever for driving change in business, right? Combined with solid execution skills and market shaping, and organic product development. So in-house product development. They also had product development from Biocon initially, but then they decided that, we should be able to develop these capabilities ourselves. So they did that, but had inorganic talent development. So really brought in a great mix of people. So sales went 6 times from 5 55 to 300 plus crores over just 39 months with this company. And today they're one of the largest. And their products sell at a huge premium. Anybody quickly can tell me which one? Just raise your hand. No, the lady in black suit? Sorry? No, Amway, no? Sorry, just raise your hand. If you've answered and you've got your $1,000, don't be greedy, okay? No, he raised his hand. You did, actually, after her. Complan. No, Heinz. That's Heinz. No. Yeah, go ahead.
Herbalife.
Sorry?
Herbalife.
Twitter.
Yeah. Herbalife.
Twitter. Yeah, it's nutritious, but only for kids. And? Himalaya? No. Okay, I'm going to give you a clue. Okay, you're not getting it. But this company, this organization, firstly I said it's global, so it can't be Dabur.
Is it Kellogg's?
Dabur went global from here.
Excuse me?
And I'll just give you one more clue and then, okay, go ahead.
Would that be Horlicks?
Horlicks, GSK, no.
Kellogg's.
No. No, okay, one more hint. It's a healthcare company, a very large healthcare company globally, which went into nutrition, didn't do too well, and then picked up.
Pediasure.
Nutrilite, no. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Oh, sorry, which one? Mercedes, no.
Is it about nutrition?
Yes, who said it? Who said it? Who said it? Yeah, go ahead. Come, I'm going to give you 1,000 C. Best business mistakes, and this is full of people who had innovations which just flopped and failed. And I'm going to actually show you an example, not from this book, but an example of a huge brand which went completely wrong, and it's by the CEO's admission as well. So thank you, Himanshu, for being alert and attentive, and it shows you're listening. Okay, so that was Abbott. Pediasure sells at a huge premium, okay, and it's made such inroads into the market, it's not funny. Right, so what did they do right? I know this is a lot of words on it, but I have taken all of these case studies after talking to the MDs and CEOs, particularly for your session, okay? So there is no cut and paste on this. And the MD of Abbott Nutrition, Rehan Khan, he is very passionate about growing this business in the right direction, based on health and nutrition, going slowly, willing to wait, but willing to get it right, and talent was a big focus. It still remains a big focus for him. So here's what he did. He and his board. Scaled up team from 200 to 1,100 in 1 year. National deployment across 75 cities because they were really not operating across all cities. From gender diversity at leadership level increased from 1 to 31 out of 125. May not seem like a huge mix. It's not still 50%, but that's a huge shift. And that's another thing. Perhaps, you know, even in the outdoor industry, you should try and look at getting a better gender diversity. I don't have the numbers, I'm not being accusative, but I think it really helps to have a good mix of yin and yang philosophies at play, because it helps to create the right kind of innovations and not just loud innovations or not just creative innovations. So I think you need a good mix of both. The other interesting thing they did was multi-sectoral experience from FMCG consulting and private equity, set up strategy office. Now this is interesting, okay? He says clearly that I wanted the pressure of my marketing and my sales people. My sales and marketing heads have to sell and market the product. I don't want them to do two functions. One is the strategy, which can be done by the consulting. I don't want to hire consulting firms necessarily, but hire from them and create a separate group that does it. The second, you know, a lot of leaders are very often caught up with incentives, pay packages, issues about the team and people. Hey, I spent about 2 hours doing my makeup. Can you put the lights on again? Wasted effort. Thank you. Yeah. So he really took the pressure completely off the marketing and sales team. So he said consulting, the consulting team, anything to do with incentives, targeting, etc., with the commercial excellence team. Okay, so that's a huge innovation. I don't think any other organization has really done this or may have done it only after. Culture of startup in a big organization. He's himself very clued into it, and he's like a startup person. If you give him an idea, he says, I want to do it just now. And he's very into it. And then 6 year running, 100% placement in Harvard Business School MBA program. And this is for real. I've seen it happen. Since he's come, he came in from Abbott globally, I think, and he took up office here in India as a global on deputation. He assured the leaders he was getting, talent he was getting from the other large organizations that, I assure you, I know it's not been a precedence, but I assure you, you will be sent to the MBA programs at Harvard Business School. And 100% he's kept his word. So, you know, that's beginning to yield results and also get more and more of the right talent in place. Sorry if you can't see, I'll move this side. So launched Abbott Nutrition Health Institute to educate the healthcare practitioners, including partnerships with universities and clinical centers, et cetera, of excellence. So that's what it was. It's international, Abbott Nutrition India is International's best managed emerging market affiliate. In 2011, it became the most admired nutrition company in India by pharma leaders and 2 Global President's Awards. So that was from being absolutely nothing. Sorry? Anything? You can keep asking me questions as we go along, you know, it's fine. Nothing? The only question you're not allowed to ask is, when can I go to the beach? Okay, so the 5th dimension, all right? The 5th dimension is market innovation. Now, this is really very interesting. I think I'm doing good on time. Okay, 11:48. So on market innovation, the example I have, yet again, you can win something. In 1984, this automobile brand was losing 1 billion francs a month. Total loss, 1984 francs, 12.5 billion. It decided to reinvent the small car for volume. They asked for outside design ideas within and to one important consultant outside. This is a huge hint for those who know cars. Gandini is the god of car design in the world. Yeah? And I mean, he's really the god of all car designs. And Gandini does not really come out and speak in public very much. Even now, his daughter is the spokesperson for him, etc. He's very reclusive. He designed it as well. So they had people internally to design, take designs from outside, and Gandini from outside to design, take the designs here and completely change them around. And they came up with an all-plastic car and a car with monospace packaging. Just for you, and a reference for you, just look at this. Monospace is this, when the body is not divided into 1, 2, and 3 parts, okay? So monospace is, it's just one. That is a hugely unique design, and in the European countries, that's a very popular design now with people. So that's the car which was launched. And learning from the two, this company developed the Twingo small car. That's the Twingo, which went on to sell 2.4 million cars over 14 years and brought the company back to profitability. This was a company that Nissan was trying to buy, and instead they did so well that they bought out Nissan. That's another clue. Anyone? Yeah. He said it first. Did you get it? No, I mean, did you get my check and the book?
Are you okay?
Okay, then you can come and collect it. So it's Renault. Come and collect it as I speak. Right? So one of the big things they did. What's your name? Rahul. Thanks, Rahul. Thanks for being attentive. So one of the big things they did was they moved the production out of Europe, okay, because it was getting very expensive. There were labor issues happening, etc. in Europe. So they moved all the production out. So Twingo was being made in Slovenia. Clio was moved out to Turkey. And the Spanish-made B-segment crossover model Captur has become segment leader in France. They've made segment leaders across all their the new brands that they launched. So the new targets set for 2017 to generate 50 billion euros in consolidated turnover was operating margin greater than 5% of turnover, etc. So obviously, they really had a huge turnaround. And for those of you who are familiar with the Duster, it's one of the biggest success stories of Renault. But this came from Dacia. Renault Dacia tie-up is what brought Duster in market. In some markets, it's promoted as Renault, like in India. In some markets, it's Dacia, but it's actually a Dacia car. And from Dacia, Duster is the best-selling worldwide in 2013. So a huge turnaround by just moving the production out from where they were to another, completely changing the market of production. And also, the design, the entire design story of Renault was changed. And that's how they brought it back. At the 6th dimension, we look at some process innovation. Okay? And this has become really a very important aspect that everyone's looking at. So tell me who this is. In 1970, it debuted in this one. All of you will have to get. If you don't, you owe me $1,000 each. So in 1970, it debuted in World's Fair in Osaka, and then museums throughout US and Canada. Okay? So the format was such that it was meant to operate as a visually completely rich format, stunning format for informative style in museums, content being uploaded on, museum content being uploaded. In 2000, it got caught in the dot-com bubble, failing business model, and then it was stuck with 160 million debt, which was huge. They just couldn't come out. And these were long-term debts, so they really couldn't come out of it. There were growing losses, shrinking revenue, close to becoming a business school case study on how a big step forward in technology and innovation completely backfired. And that's what happened. Conventional film priced at $1,000 per print per studio versus $22,000 for 2D and $45,000. So there were huge price differentials that they couldn't manage. And it was very heavy. The format was so heavy that it weighed about 250 and 500 pounds. Okay, I'll come to you first. I'll just finish this. And it also happened that the theaters needed extra equipment to even put it up. So theaters were not willing to even take it. They said, this is not for us. So everybody was rejecting this excellent technology. And SEC, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission, investigated into some revenue irregularities and accounting irregularities, etc. 40% drop in share price. No theater company wanted to shell out cash. And it was just on the verge of a wipeout. Anyone? Yeah, no, wait. Who put his hand up first? Yeah, you did.
IMAX.
Yeah. Okay, you got it. Good. So we can move faster. So that was IMAX. And the innovative thinking they did was the JRS arrangement, okay, which is a joint revenue sharing arrangement with theaters. So they went out and told the theaters that we are willing to just project. We will give you the technology. You don't have to pay us for it. But whatever box office sales you make, you share that with us. And a couple of them started experimenting and saying, OK, we'll give it a shot. And that really worked well for them. So the process innovation was in the joint revenue sharing deal. That's what really turned things around for them. They had a great technology, but costs were high. The second thing they did, they moved to digital technology, which they did not have earlier. And that made it even better because it started weighing so less. And the price slashed to $150 from $30,000. So you see how they had price benefits that came in because of a process change that they made, right? So the innovation was in process and in the deal. So AMC signed a 100-theater deal, and it was the immersive platform theater for that superior suspension of disbelief, as they call it. Oh, I have to give you your... Thank you for being here. Okay. Right. Here's another one. Another chance to win a lottery. It's a New Jersey-based organization. Okay, this may be a little tough for you all. If you don't get it, that's fine. I'll keep a check. But operations in over 100 countries claim to be world's largest in electronic, electrical, safety devices, undersea telecom systems, specialty valves, medical products, plastics, adhesives. They were huge. They were absolutely one of the largest. They were the largest in all this, as claimed. And they had over 40 major acquisitions in 1986, right? And then, in 2005, the CEO Dennis Kozlowski, CFO Mark Swartz, and General Counsel Mark Belenik found guilty of taking bonuses worth more than $120 million without board approval. They also had a scheme that they created within the organization of loans to employees, which obviously...
Tyco.
Oh, yes. Who was that? Please stand up. I don't know where it came from. Yeah, that's right. That was Tyco Electronics, right? Have you all heard of Tyco? It's actually one of the biggest landmark case studies. And way before Goldman Sachs and all that happened and the irregularities and governance issues came up in subprime mortgages, this was the one that set the stage for how governance can go completely awry because nobody noticed what was happening. And this was also a case study of just governance innovation can completely change a company around from where it was, right? So let me show you what it really did. So those three are serving as a prison sentence. And since replacing its board and its teams and its executives, the company has really turned around completely. Tyco Electronics, now it's called TE Connectivity. They've changed the name, which is also interesting because they want, obviously, that memory to fade out. So Edward Breen was brought in as the CEO and Eric Fillmore as the vice president. The two of them together did some very, very interesting things. Three things: strong ethical corporate leadership, accountability, and behavior tracking processes. You know why I brought this up with you was because the first time of all the examples I saw, this was the only organization which looked at governance as a measure of effectiveness of an employee. And that's very interesting. The other reason I really brought this up also was because outdoor is an industry over the last many years. I think that's come a long way now in terms of governance. It's always kind of seen with a bit of suspicion here and there, you know. And I think that's an area where governance can really make a big difference and the industry can grow much, much more. And I think if measurability, if transparency and all of that is brought in, I think, you know, that's the kind of collaboration that people are looking for these days. So they also created the Vital Values Ethics Reflections website, and they also had something called the concern line. Even today it exists, that employees can actually anonymously send out any concerns and issues that they seem to see, that, you know, something is happening and it is absolutely never revealed, but it's published in that report. And then an inquiry is set to, you know, kind of unearth whether this is true or not, but that employee is not touched because he raised the concern. So they are today one of the largest, again, $13 billion world in connectivity. 2004, Breen was listed as one of Business Week's best managers. Tyco won the Center for Corporate Change Award for outstanding improvement in board governance. 18,000 patents awarded or pending. And look at this, even China has given them 124 Chinese patents, which is very unusual. So that's the kind of, would you like to quickly come and take your, right. While you walk up here, I'm just going to move on. Okay, and the last dimension, okay, I think we're doing good for time. So in the last dimension is about, sorry, your name, please? Thanks, Arun. That's you. Again, Forbes' best mistakes, okay? So in terms of lateral innovation, all right, this is my favorite and one of the most interesting because it really allows your mind to dissolve all boundaries, and you're not supposed to see any boundary and say, everything is possible in this world, and I'm not thinking about the business that I am in, but about my mind's possibilities. So let's see what I'm talking about here. In 2001, sales fell about 33%. The company's operating loss of 6% of turnover. The basic product offer was under pressure. Portable sales volumes were static. Do not say the name if you know it already, but just raise your hands, please. Okay, so software service and other revenues had fallen by 13%. The products were dated. Nobody wanted it anymore. It was like kind of ugly. People were big. Initially, people said it's very good. Then people said it's kind of ugly, right? At over 76% of sales were from the industrial and commercial sector. US economy was also slowing down, so they felt the bite. They really felt the bite, right? And then they revolutionized the music industry with the fruits of their innovation. Raise your hands. Have you already answered before? Okay. Yeah, Apple. So the interesting thing here is Apple could have constantly said, I'm going to make better desktops. Okay, people don't like the design, I'm going to make a better design desktop. They didn't. They completely shifted. The battleground shifted. They said, fine, all you guys keep fighting on computers. I'm changing my battlefield. I'm just going into music. Now they're talking camera, imaging, right? They're talking anything but phones. I'm sorry, they're talking anything but computers. However, because of the diversification of completely a different industry that they went into, the sales of their desktops and laptops also started going up. So it really fed right back into the business that was suffering so much. Right? So they changed. 75% of the US market, iTunes Music Store, 87% of all legal digital, blah, blah. You know the results. You know, interesting thing that is my own analysis, which I want to share with you, is that I'm moving on from this slide. You all know it, okay? So look at the way they moved on. From the iPod is where they started, really, okay? They started this innovation from iPod and then went into all the other areas. Look at this. I'm getting out of this, all right? Okay, that's an interesting one. He said that, you know, like Henry Ford said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have just said a faster horse, presumably eating less hay. So he used intuition. Apple made market. So even in terms of research, they didn't rely too much on the numbers and figures because all they could research was the desktops, right? So research would not have allowed them to come in with a completely different format, like music and the iPhone. So they had product and design innovation, innovative retail experience, created consumer experience, and very importantly, I want you to focus on that, saying cannibalize periodically. Okay, they did not wait for competition to come and eat up their products and their innovation. iPad 1, iPad 2 eats up iPad 1. iPad 3 eats up iPad 2. iPhone, it eats up everything else, okay? They're constantly eating up their own business to create the new one. So before competition can get to their business and finish it off, they're doing it themselves. So they're way ahead of the game, way ahead of the game. And they also always surprise the market. You know, what happened was, sorry, go back to that. Even at the time that, you know, gaming consoles were really becoming big, everybody expected Apple to move into gaming. They chose not to and then moved into music. So they really surprised the market as they were expecting it. So the growth obviously was that path. But you know, the interesting thing I was analyzing, this is my own thinking, is why did Steve Jobs do what he did, the way he did it? Somewhere to me it seems like Apple is trying not to create products, but to address people's loneliness. I think they're constantly innovating to see how can we address people's loneliness more and more and more, right? That's my alarm. So I feel that's what he did. I don't think he was really working on this product or that product. Creating music, creating rich phones, creating Siri, creating, you know, everything is, I think he somehow had the foresight and probably because he was a very lonely person himself. You would have read about it and understood, you know, that Steve Jobs had a pretty lonely childhood and pretty lonely time growing up, and when he's right on top, that's obviously very lonely as well. So, but some of these innovations happened, and then some were out-innovated. So I'm going to give you 2 examples here of innovations that happened and got out-innovated, okay? Okay, so Margo. Margo is a fantastic case study, and you would know it because you're from Bengal, and it was the #1 brand in Bengal, untouched. Nobody could come anywhere close to it. Great success. It failed completely, right? Then they started innovating and putting in things into the soap and putting the packaging in order and making it look better and better and better. It didn't work. Nothing. The brand is completely dwindling. Why did this happen? Because there was one simple problem. The soap looked ugly because, like Chandrika, Margo is also a neem-based soap and Ayurvedic soap. It's meant to look like that. If it starts looking like a Lux, people don't believe it that it's a Ayurvedic and a health soap, right? They came up with a campaign. I'll translate. It's in Bengali. This was their biggest disaster. They came up with a campaign which said, "Dekhte kharab, makte bhalo." Right? It meant it looks bad, but it works well. When people were not even thinking about it as being bad, so they all turned around, everybody turned around and said, you know, you're right. It actually looks pretty ugly. Why am I using it? Why don't I shift to something which looks even better? So that was the biggest problem with Margo. They brought out a factor about them which people didn't even think about it as being ugly. Now tell me, if I ask you a different question. I have analyzed this against a celebrity to say, if Margo had to learn a lesson from a Bollywood star, what would that lesson be, and which star would I be talking about? You have to give my answer, not your answer, right? If you get my answer right, then you again get my little check. So Margo should have learned from somebody saying, even though it's ugly, don't talk about it being ugly. Talk about its goodness, its performance. So who could it have been, the Bollywood star? Very quickly, because I still have 10. Raise your hand, I can't see. No, you can't answer again. You can't answer. You've answered, right? Yeah, you can't. Yeah? No. Close. Yeah?
Would that be Irfan Khan?
Yeah, Irfan Khan, yeah. That was my answer. Because, you know, Irfan Khan is considered the intelligent woman's sex symbol. Okay? So, all of you who've been spending time dressing up, wearing nice blazers, jackets and everything, that's the kind of man that the intelligent woman likes. And he never talked about himself being ugly. It was his performance, performance, and performance. And I think if they had continued on that path as Irfan Khan, that would have really worked well for them. So I'm going to give you something, right? Can I, will you quickly walk up? I've been giving everybody very serious books, right? But you look like a serious person, so I'm going to give you a Garfield. Now it's not about innovation, it's just about having fun because you're in, so lie down on the beach and you can read this Garfield. It's from my collection itself, so. All right, is there something, no, it's fine. Sorry? For you, a Garfield? Oh, you answered Apple. Yeah, come. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about it. There you go. How the mighty fall, okay? Innovative companies which have innovated but have actually completely tanked for lots of reasons. So read this and know how not to fall. Okay? Second one being Nokia, right? Nokia's big. Anyone from Nokia here? So I can be careful with what I say. I'm never careful with what I say, so it's okay. So Nokia is a brand that actually is one of my favorite brands. I've worked on this brand for a few years, and I've loved it. It was one of my phones for many years and many years. They relied too much on the user interface and on trust as a factor, okay? And I bring this example to you because, you know, a lot of times innovation takes a backseat because a lot of these companies out there even today, keep talking about we are the most trusted brand, right? So we have to remain as we are. We can't change. We are most trusted. Trust, we did a lot of research. You know, one of our organizations does research with about 30,000 consumers across India. And we gather a lot of lateral insights. And we understand from that that trust is no longer such a big deal with a lot of consumers for several categories, and least of all for mobile phones. Nobody wants a mobile phone for more than 3 to 4 months. And kids, especially, you know, teenagers and young people, they deliberately lose it and come back and say, I lost it, I need a new phone. Because they just want an upgrade and an upgrade and an upgrade. Trust doesn't matter. And also, a very important thing, trust mattered in a generation where they were very intimidated by the mobiles. They didn't know how to use it. Pick up the next phone, you don't have to read the manual. It's the same user interface. It worked very well. Now, everybody cracks it. 3-year-olds crack mobile phones and iPads and everything within. Give them 20 minutes, they've cracked it. It's not a big deal. Technology cracking is not a big deal anymore. So I think they misjudged that. They didn't really get that right that much. So which star am I talking about that they could have learned from, who has constantly reinvented and reinvented and reinvented and stayed relevant? Yes. Did you answer anything before? Okay, then. Chole Ashun? Oh, is that so? See, now you backbenchers, it pays to be in the front rows, huh? Next time. So Anirban, right? Konta di apnake? Are you a spiritual person? No. Oh, I knew this wasn't going to work. Okay, so I won't give you the spiritual one. I had a very nice spiritual thing to give you. So it's called The Big Move. It's about, again, innovation and brands. It's light reading, so bhal lagbe. Bolbe na amake bhal lagle. Okay. Right? So that's Amitabh. And look at that. You know, all the brands which we've been talking about, saying, you know, they've dipped on the score of innovation. Look at Nokia. This is Nokia. Stopped. It's gone. Okay, this is from Bloomberg. Bloomberg's survey of the best global brands in 2000-2013 across 3 years. Nokia has stopped, and that's where Apple has picked up again, and Samsung has come back. Because Nokia got attacked. Nokia was everybody's phone. I think they were very ambitious. It's bound to happen. You know, this is, if you are everybody's delight, then people are going to take the share away from you here and there. So at the entry level, a lot of the new makes started coming in at much cheaper prices, and at the premium level, Samsung started attacking it. So I think it lost out on both ends. Okay, I'm actually going to now, I'm at the end of it. There are no more dimensions to this, but I wanted to take you through John Travolta, one of my favorite actors, to just show you that how do you innovate even as a person, as a personality, as an organization, okay? Many of you would remember, have you all seen Face Off? Okay. And have you all seen his dance with Olivia Newton-John? Right. So I'm just quickly going to play it so you know and understand how John Travolta, what he did was very interesting. He realized that if he was the Saturday Night Fever star and suddenly became the Face Off star, it's going to cause serious dissonance in people's minds. Right? People are not going to be able to accept it. Now, today you see me like this. Tomorrow, if I come as a Brahma Kumari, you're going to wonder what the hell went wrong with her. And, oh, just 2 days, you know, maybe Goa does it to people. But that was a problem. And he realized that the young teens who like him for his Saturday Night Fever dance are the ones growing up. And they are not going to like him forever. That was a typical problem, let's say, a lot of these brands face. Even Classic, for example, Classic cigarettes, etc., faced it. They came up with Classic Miles. So he went into hibernation for a while. He didn't do movies for a few years. He didn't come up with anything. And then when he came back in a totally new avatar. It was just fantastic. I'm going to stop this after a couple of seconds because you've all seen it. But just see the change that happened in
him. Sandy? Tell me about it, stud.
Body language as well. His eyes, his body language, his face, everything. I mean, everything has changed and he's reinvented, reinnovated. You better shape up. I'm going to shut that and now take a look at this Travolta. Imagine if he was the same Travolta in this movie.
I've been chasing this guy ever since I joined the force. He has no conscience, and he shows no remorse. He's the mastermind behind numerous bombings and political assassinations. There's a felony list a mile long: murder, arson, kidnapping, terrorism, you name it. He's the most dangerous and brilliant criminal mind I've ever known. For years, I've been watching him, tracking him, studying his every move. I know his every mannerism, facial tick, gesture. I know him better than he knows himself. And now, after all this time, I finally figured out a way to trap him. I will become him.
Vasant, I have another 5-7 minutes or 10 minutes because we started late. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. Right, so here's another example of innovation to aberration, okay? And this is a really interesting one because somebody innovated, fell so madly in love with his own innovation that he would not listen to any voice of reason. This was Pepsi. David Novak came from Yum Foods, then joined from Pizza Hut. He concluded that what worked for Pepsi was new product launches all the time, diet, packaging, 2 liters, 24 cans, etc. He said innovation works for Pepsi and I'm going to innovate, right? He was right, except that he got the innovation wrong. Observed that Pepsi sales were down. Clear beverages like clearly Canadian bottled water were emerging alternatives, so he said clear beverage is what we must go with. Fantastic innovation. Nobody's ever done this in the cola industry, right? Let's go with clear. Sorry? Okay? Okay. So breakthrough idea was clear Pepsi, no caffeine. He loved the idea, but his worst mistake, driven by haste and fiery desire to launch, his franchise bottlers said, it doesn't taste like Pepsi. There's a problem. And he said, no, it's not meant to taste like Pepsi. Let's launch it in Super Bowl. They said, but if it says Pepsi, it must taste like Pepsi. And he said, let's go with a national launch. Then they said, well, franchise bottlers said, let's sell it at a premium because they were still not convinced. They said, it's going to be tactical. It's going to sell for a brief period, and then let's make money out of it and refresh the brand and then get it out of the way. He said, no, it's not a gimmick, but after they launched it in a big way with the Super Bowl, they couldn't do a quality control on it. The quality was poor, and which made it taste even less like Pepsi. And that was a big problem because the consumers then rejected it. And this is after all the research that was done. This was all researched, okay, in a market, in one of the markets. Consumers loved the product, you know, and that's why you shouldn't depend so much on research. A lot of innovation happens 80% because of intuition. 20% do a little check. This was the other way around. 90% or 100% based on, 10% on intuition, all based on research. Consumers love it, the dealers love it, everybody loves it, I'm going to do it, right? The whole world is going clear. So innovation can be a dangerous desire. What did he do? He didn't listen to wise dissent. He didn't study what Pepsi as a name evoked in the consumer's mind. He didn't study what cola evoked in the consumer's mind. Cola is a dark drink. When you say cola, you know, everything has color connotations to it. You say cola, you know, when you say Amul, for example, you can't think of the color purple. I mean, each thing has its own connotation, right? He took quality for granted and very poor execution, which is one of the banes of all innovations that go wrong is poor execution, right? Okay, I've come to the end of it almost. So this is a Nike. There are no more gifts, so now you can all fall asleep and yawn because I've run out of gifts. I'm going to run through this very quickly. You all know the story of Nike. And Nike also kind of dipped a little, but then came back and they took a punt with someone like Tiger and said that at that time Tiger Woods was not a big deal, but they said, no, we're going to go after it because he has potential. They identified potential. The thing about Nike was, and now they're very big in football, so I'm just going to get this out. They're a very successful company. The important thing about them was their vision was not about shoes or making money. Okay, and I had a long chat with the marketing director at Nike before I put this up in front of you all. Because their vision is about making athletes perform better. That is all they wanted to do right from the beginning because it was set up by two athletes, right? One of them was a coach and the other was a track and field athlete. And the first ambassador was an athlete as well. So continuous product innovation, consumer experience, retail innovation, communication, etc. And more recently, they haven't given up on their product innovation across lines. They've just come up with something which is the color dry technology, dyeing fabric without using water. See how relevant they're keeping themselves all the time, right? With a little CSR angle to it. Water shortage all over the world. We can dye clothes without using water. That's the latest one, just launched maybe a week ago or so. So they serve the athlete, reward the shareholders, continue to lead industry. The last ad, and I'm done with it, I just want a couple of questions from you all. You know, Nike never, and we worked on this brand, so Nike is never dependent on celebrities as much. They've used celebrities to promote their products, but they've been very often, they've not used celebrities. They have depended solely on their innovation towards athletic performance, right? And they also then from athletics, they went into other sports, football, cricket in India particularly, and golf, etc. They've gone into sporting performance and sporting innovation, largely keeping it to, of course, footwear. But if you go to the Nike outlet in Oxford Street, have you visited? It started in the US, but then in Oxford Street, they have this Nike museum kind of thing. It's a must-see and came years and years ago. They were one of the early ones, like Lucky Strike, to say, we don't want to sell shoes here. It's a museum for tomorrow's innovation on sports performance. It is mind-blowing. You could spend the entire day there, right? So I'm just going to play an ad to just show you that they don't depend on anything but their vision and their promise. A quick one on this is we were going to use celebrity stars who never showed up. So we just used people, all the people on the road.
क्या कर रहा है यार?
कोने में? ये बालकनी? बोल देना? हेलो?
If it's so strong a brand that's innovating on all 7 dimensions continuously, we went through the history with the marketing team and we really couldn't figure out which is the year that they really had a bad year. Because consistently, they were focusing on one dimension at a time, but definitely covering all 7 dimensions, right? And just want to come back to this, that I won't go through all this. I just want to leave this thought with you to say that, can you give me just 1 or 2 examples of any innovation like this that you may have done in your organization and that has really worked and turned things around a little bit for you? Anyone? Just 1 or 2 examples maybe? None? Okay, go for it. You don't get any rewards for this, okay? So you still want to answer? You don't want to answer if there's no check and no book. So go ahead. No, he'll give you a mic.
Hi friends, I represent Heritage Foods India Limited, and we have a brand called Heritage Fresh, which is into a chain of food and grocery. If you look at when modern trade was very hot in the market, like More or other giants like Spencer's, Food World are very hot in the market, nobody was focused in the F&B category, especially fruits and vegetables.
Which category?
F&V, fruits and
F&V,
vegetables.
okay, yeah.
So if you look at our modern trade, our brand positioning is Heritage Fresh, and also our store is positioned only for fresh and largely under F&V category. My entry driven, if you enter my store, my entry driven, the first 30% of the space only goes for this F&V, fruits and vegetable market, and that is our entry driven. That is the whole catch about the modern trade, our Heritage Fresh.
Okay, so what was the innovation that you had? I'm sorry, I couldn't quite gather.
No, that's a focus, ma'am. That's a focus.
That was your focus.
The format, we have defined the format. Basically, other modern trade, if you look at, they are more keen on FMCG.
Okay, fine.
Okay,
so you have defined it as F&V.
Yeah, defined as a fruits and vegetable. That is a category, that's a catch. That's our success.
Right, okay, yeah, fine. Anyone else? Maybe one more? Yeah, sure. Sorry? No, just use the mic, please. I can't hear you. Mic for a gentleman here in white. Yeah.
पहले हम लोग ऐसी ट्राई राठी सरिये के साथ करते थे. उसके बाद हमने इंट्रोड्यूस करा कामधेनु सरिया और उस पे बहुत सारे प्रयोग करे इस तरीके के जो आपने दिखाए.
टैलेंट इनोवेशन की बात कर रहे हैं आप?
जी.
अच्छा.
और वो जो भी प्रयोग हमने करा 100% सफल गए. परिणाम ये हुआ कि ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की 10 सालों में 1000 करोड़ रुपए की ब्रांड इमेज बनी.
10 साल में हुई?
10 साल में.
और उसके पहले?
उसके पहले तो जीरो थी. गांव से आए थे.
अच्छा, जीरो से
बिल्कुल गांव से आए थे. और दिल्ली में पहला प्रोडक्ट हमने इंट्रोड्यूस करा था जो है बहुत सफल रहा.
और अभी नेशनली आपने लॉन्च किया है?
अभी नहीं, लोग कुछ डिस्प्यूट हो गया उन भाइयों में, तो इसलिए कुछ प्रॉब्लम आई उसमें.
वेरी गुड. ओके, एक्सीलेंट. या नोइंग माइक हियर, फर्स्ट रो.
Perhaps a couple of decades ago, we only used to have hand painting in the industry.
Yes, I know.
There was a time when Tendulkar and Kambli looked exactly the same on the hoarding. So a lot of it depended on what the artist impression of the photograph was. And any one campaign went around the country, then you'd get different shades, different colors and different sizes of Kambli and Tendulkar. We introduced digital print. At that time it was quite a risk because the cost for digital printing was about 125 a square foot, whereas hand painting was 3 rupees a square foot. So that's the background. Well, today it's safe to say that more than 10 million square feet is being printed almost every month.
You know, Nami, another thing on that came to my mind was also that I think the outdoor industry needs to collaborate. Maybe it's a thought I want to leave with all of you, that maybe you need to collaborate beyond the outdoor family, and maybe with the steel industry, the Material Research Council in India, the Packaging Research Council in India, different industries are researching extensively in bettering their materials, which ultimately also impacts the outdoor industry. And I think you can form a consortium of people who are not necessarily from the industry alone, but actually learn from and feed off each other and see how you can take this entire industry through collaborative measures. I think that was a thought that I wanted to leave with you all.
Sure, we will keep that in mind. Thank you for a great suggestion.
Okay, and आपने बहुत अच्छा आंसर दिया, आपकी सोच मुझे अच्छी लगी. हाँ, तो आपको मैं एक चीज़ देना चाहती हूँ, आप लोगे ना? मुझे लगता है आपको देखकर के आप शायद ज़रा स्पिरिचुअल किस्म के हो, इसलिए आपको मैं एक स्पिरिचुअल मैं लेकर आई हूँ, तो किसी को देना तो पड़ेगा ना. और आप पूरे सफ़ेद में आए हो, तो मतलब श्वेत किस्म के आदमी हो, दिल श्वेत होगा. तो आपके श्वेत दिल के लिए हमने ये खोज के निकाला है, गाइड टू सेल्फ रियलाइजेशन. शायद आपके काम आ जाए. Okay, thank you. Nice to hear from you. Okay, now here's the moment of truth from me as I leave the stage. That the books are well, the $1,000 notes. Have you all opened it? Well, go ahead and open it now. Not a problem. You can open it, and I've also written there saying please spend it innovatively. I've also been a little innovative on the $1,000 notes. Those were to reward your attention, and the books were to reward your getting here together. Okay, thank you so much, and I'll leave you with this.